Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 169 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am, as always, one of your hosts, emallson, and joining me, we have my co-host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, they're nerfing with the plus.
Again.
So that they can nerf the god comp more.
Yeah, which maybe not enough, we'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting times. Turns out Augmentation Evoker a little bit strong.
Still really good.
I don't think they're nerfing Augmentation, are they? Oh, there's like
No.
minor nerfs to Augmentation.
Minor at best. Yeah, I mean a lot of what, well, we can talk about the details, but yeah, they're basically nerfing the classes around that, which, to be fair, isn't enough, I'll say. But we can talk about that. So
yeah. Before we get into that, though, how was your raid this week?
Raid went better, we'll say. We got a full clearing. Did take probably about almost 80% of our raid time. So it was, the full night on Tuesday, and then I think we spent 3 hours on Wednesday clearing it all. So but yeah, we got through it all. We funnily enough, we have, I guess, I don't know, someone gave us their skip, so we were able to skip right to Neltharion. Started on Neltharion, back cleared basically everything, and then up till Sark on Tuesday, and then basically spent 3 hours Thursday, re-killing Sark, which is, it's interesting, the re-kill, because you have like one person in a different role, and it becomes like just an entirely different fight. Like we had one of our bomb goer downer people in phase 3 was different, so they had a different bomb position just based on our comp. So I guess it was 2 people, one new person doing it, and then the second person was just in a different position than they typically were. So we had a couple of wipes to that, but all in all, it wasn't bad. I mean, we wiped to Rashok a couple of times where I don't think we should have, just because we had a healer wanting to gear up an alt, and while their alt is not under geared, like it's still like 445 or whatever, it's just a different class than they're used to. So so yeah, I had a couple of struggles on Rashok, but I mean, other than that, we got through it all, which was good. It was a good thing. Then so here I have a secondary rating update. Because I am now a Wrath Classic raider.
Oh no!
And so I went 4 or 5 hard mode in Trial of the Grand Crusader. We didn't try hard mode in Nubarak yet. We're building up to it. But didn't do that, and then went 50 out of 50 in 10-man hard mode TOGC, and got didn't get hard modes in Ulduar done, but did like a 25-man normal run in Ulduar in like 3 hours. So
you missed your free 100s from doing hard mode Ulduar.
Yeah, that's true.
Because there was a bug actually this week where it wasn't a real 100, but it would show on the log page that you got a 100 because I broke it. And so yeah.
Nice.
that was my day yesterday, was fixing that.
Nice little bug there. Yeah, I didn't try any 25-man hard mode Ulduar, but did get a full clearing, which is fun. I know it's really not a classic sort of topic, but it's fun to go back into those raids. I've realized that, I don't know if you ever did this if you played like old RTS games, or even like Dota does this, like Dota 2, like basically just play the computer. We used to call it like comp stomps.
Yeah.
You like play the computer, like they are like good but not great, and like you and like maybe 2 or 3 buddies go in and like stomp out like, a 4v4 StarCraft 2 match, or like a whatever it ends up being. And that's what raiding in Wrath Classic feels like. Because like literally, like first raid, first time through Trial of the Grand Crusader 10-man, they're like, all right, Anam, as a hunter, because I'm playing a hunter, I was like, you have to soak like orbs on the twin Valks or whatever. And I was like, okay, I vaguely remember doing this at the time, but like I was like, so what do I do? And they're like, click the light buff and then just make sure light orbs don't hit the group. I was like, okay. And they're like, and the Reclear's like, when I tell you, just hit deterrence. Because I guess like when the AoE goes off from one of the Valks, you're supposed to change colors. And he was like, you're just going to stay the light color and then just basically deterrence. I was like, okay, that's it. And like did that, and like that was the fight. And it was like, I'm like, there's no mechanics in this
Yeah.
raid.
Yeah.
So it was fun. It's basically like the best I can equate it to is like Wrath Classic rating. And I feel like this is probably the same for TBC and Classic, like for like regular Classic. It's like it's just like comp stops. It's like everybody knows what to do. You don't even have to be over geared. You just have to have a pulse, and like you get to kill things, and it's fun.
Yeah,
So
what happens with those bosses when people have gear is kind of crazy. Like the
yeah, like the speedrun stuff
Yeah.
is nuts. Yeah. Yeah.
His gear Classic, I don't think was built so that you had the gear going in. It was built that you had the gear afterward, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
or rather, the gear was the nerf up until ICC, where they just like slammed it with the buff, right?
The aura, yeah. The
Yeah,
aura
the aura.
buff, yeah. 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 So but no, it's that was my rating week, is rating basically 3 days a week now. So one of those being in Wrath, which is it's funny. Like if they end up doing, I don't think I will play Beyond Wrath Classic, because at that point you're literally playing like thinking about Cataclysm and some of the raids coming up, and even
Right.
ICC to like an extent, like remembering some of those fights. Like ICC is like the mode is, I think, the turning point of like raiding becoming modern WoW raiding, where you have like multiple mechanics, like, you know, different jobs for different people, which is fun, but like I don't want to do
You don't want to do
progression
an extra day
twice.
of that, yeah.
Exactly. I don't want to have double. I don't have like 2 progression rates. If I want that, I'll just play a different character in retail and like join a weekend guild in retail, right? And the fights are easier. The classes are a little bit more fun. Although hunters with mana, super weird. I still don't.
Yeah.
You never run out of it because the fights are short. But like, well, in 10 man, I did. Like in 10 man, the fights are just long enough that like I've run out of mana on like 2 fights, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, that was my rating. How were you? I guess you're in the middle of it. Did you guys full clear last night, or?
We did not full clear. So last week I mentioned that we didn't full clear. I think we did our show on Monday, right? So we had already done the full raid week. But yeah, we didn't full clear. We spent forever on Neltharion, and then didn't get Sarkareth. This week we went in, we used our skip, and we just like 3-shot Neltharion, and then spent 3 hours on Sarkareth.
Oh.
Some of which is like we did get Sarkareth down. We got Sarkareth down.
That's good.
But some of it is like we switched to tanks after Prague much immediately, and I am doing both what I was doing before in phase 2, and now also doing the part where I stay up.
Okay.
And so what I was doing before in phase 2 is I was basically like AoE taunting everything and tanking all the ads and the boss at the same time for the latter 2/3 of the phase, which puts a lot of pressure on my cooldowns, on my defensives, and yet I have to save a bunch of them to survive the go down.
Right, yeah.
And also I'm going into the go down with the tank debuff on me still. So there's just like that's I kept not making it through phase 2, or not making it through the like making it through the go down and then just like falling over a few seconds after. Wouldn't have enough health.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I ended up just committing less stuff in phase 2 and just hard overcommit in the intermission, and just like, so I'm using diffuse stone form, dampen harm, health potion, health stone to survive it. It's ridiculous. But we're changing that. I'm done with it. We're changing that.
Nice. Awesome. And then I guess so you basically have the rest of the instance today.
Yeah, tonight we're gonna go back in and clear the rest. But like, for context, last week clearing up to Neltharion took us under 2 hours.
Oh, nice.
So
I think for us, like I said, the Rash Shock wipes were annoying, and then we wiped a couple times to to Magmarax actually.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, like Zakarn, we killed Zakarn this week, I think, with like 4 people alive. So like,
Classic.
definitely not clean, but we got through it. I think in maybe 1 wipe, if that. I think that might have been our first pull. But yeah, Rashok and Magmarax were the difficult one. We actually have a couple wipes to experiments,
Yeah.
just because like I am now calling things in like for like dispels or like groups on Rashok, and like playing Mistweaver currently and like also having that responsibility, my brain hurts like trying to do my ramps plus call that. So it's just that I don't typically do calls like that. It's learning things. So but yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah, hopefully you guys get a full clearing, and then it's just sort of full clear farm mode for the rest of the time. And then I got that new progression, new Barak 25-man hard mode. That'll be the good stuff.
I'm sure you'll be spending a few hundred pulls.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% it'll probably be probably 3-4 weeks of progression. So we'll get it done. We'll get it done.
You guys extending that lockout?
Of course. All
right. But we got some, before we talk about the Mythic Plus nerfs, we got some other news items to get through. Starting with actually relevant, the Hardcore Classic realms. Those are launching this Thursday, right?
Yeah, this Thursday, I believe it's 3 p.m. Pacific, something like that. Is the launch. So and so they did a little bit of like a community council live chat where players got to ask questions of developers. I think it was on Friday. So a couple, not a ton of great news right here, but a couple of like, we'll say interesting little tidbits that came out of this that are all really classic related. We'll say, well, hardcore was the focus. There's a couple of things that aren't specifically hardcore pieces. So I think at least the interesting ones here are like the idea that they're not going to do like region wide or server wide death messages. So like if someone dies, they're not going to tell everybody that person dies, which is very similar to like other hardcore ARPGs do. Like I guess it's really PoE does sort of overall. Like they have a death message channel that you can join, and if someone dies, you'll get a notice of it. And then the hardcore add-on itself also had this sort of death log essentially. As people died, it would announce it, but they're limiting it just to guilds. And so they'll talk about maybe in the future adding like a wider range of the announcement, but for now it'll be guilds at launch. I think it's fun.
I don't understand that. That's like a huge part of the fun of the Hardcore Classic realm that everybody played on, was like logging in and just like running around, you're doing your thing, and you see level 60 die, right?
Yeah.
Random level 60 you don't know, or even worse, level 59.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. It did get a little spammy. That might be the issue of like, if you were on like during peak time, it's like a lot of like low level people, like sub level 10s dying.
Yeah.
Which I think maybe you can filter that out. Like that's like the break point. But yeah, it was always interesting to be like, like the 40 plus or even like 45 plus people when they die, there's like an internal like, oh man, that sucks. But then in my mind, I'm like, how did it happen?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit unfortunate, but it's sort of Blizzard's point of view there. The other thing that was interesting that popped up was a couple of questions on what they call solo self-found mode. So if you haven't played really PoE, I think is the big one here. I don't know if Diablo has a solo self-found mode, but the idea with solo self-found is essentially you only get to pick up gear or use gear that drops for you. So like PoE has a very robust like trading economy if you want to do that, where you can trade really good items and you can sort of buy them with currency in the game. But with solo self-found, essentially you only get to pick up items that drop specifically for you.
Yeah.
And so they ask a little bit about that, and Blizzard's response, and they gave a longer response on Twitter to this too, was essentially they are looking at not solo self-found, but basically a self-found option. To play. And the reason they're not looking at solo self-found is because there's, what do you do whenever you group up with someone? Like if you do an elite quest and a really good item, just random BOE drops or like world item drops, like who gets that item, or is that truly solo self-found or not?
Yeah.
And then
grouping up for a,
Yeah, and then it's like doing dungeons, like what happens to the loot from dungeons if you're going to do that on hardcore because those are available. So there is some like interesting, I think, decisions that need to be made, but a self-found option would be cool. Be interesting to see like what becomes like the best, professions to use and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's that.
They also mentioned that okay, this is maybe more relevant to me. So they think classic, the idea of classic plus, which is classic with things added to it,
Mhm.
or a kind of new classic expansion kind of deal, is interesting. Big air quotes on the interesting. Um, they noted that there's going to be another season of WoW Classic.
Mhm.
That's not going to be Season of Mastery 2,
Interesting.
which is interesting to me. I'm not sure what that is going to look like, but we'll see. Um, and then there's also, they mentioned they're developing Random Dungeon Finder and the Quest Helper in game for Wrath Classic, which I didn't realize. I obviously haven't played very much Wrath Classic. I didn't realize they didn't have the Quest Helper in there. I know that was like a 3.3 feature.
Yeah, this later one.
Which they could leave that one out, actually. Just
I
don't.
mean, Questy does it already. Like, there's an add-on that does the
Yeah,
quest helper
yeah, and
already.
then
If you want that,
yeah. So
but
they could leave that one out. Random Dungeon Finder. I mean, every.
that is the one of it's funny, one of the most polarizing issues. So being in Wrath Classic when they announced that and like sort of talking to some of even like the guild that I'm in, right? Which is honestly, I joined a random guild, so I know none of these people. So it's like
Right.
and it's a bunch of people that play a lot of Wrath Classic. And like even in that like that little microcosm of like 24 other people, like there is so many like polarizing opinions on like, oh, this is great, or I mean, it's like basically ranged from, oh, this is great, awesome addition, to this is terrible, like ruins the game, kind of, to like in the middle where it's still negative, where it's like, this is like 3 patches too late, servers are dead. And I'm like, I mean, we raid every week. I think we're doing okay. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the opinions are all over the place on the random dungeon finder. I don't like, yeah, it's funny playing Wrath, and like I do basically a daily dungeon every day, like the beta dungeon, because I need currency or whatever. So like it's kind of like the Mythic Plus dungeon or whatever.
Yeah.
Using the group finder there, like it's just like using the group finder on retail to get into a Mythic Plus dungeon. It's like
Yeah.
not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I think the funny thing is that people have like, instead of yelling about, oh, I don't have the right amount of IO, it's like I don't have the gear score, and like I'm like 4.8 and people want 5K. I don't understand why. Like I'm better than, it's like that same dichotomy
Mm-hmm.
or that same issue still exists.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, random dungeon fighter, awesome. I mean, it's, you take sort of the ability to like queue into something, and the game, puts you in it. But I
Yeah.
don't I don't think Wrath Classic needs it, and I don't think it materially helps or hurts the population, whether it's in or not. I think it's just becomes more convenient, which is,
I wonder, like, obviously ICC is not out yet. I wonder if this is a sign that Wrath Classic is going to be here a while.
potentially, yeah.
Like the quest helper is kind of whatever. That one, I mean, the quest simplifying the process of leveling like that. I think the only real thing that does is mean you don't have to install Questy, and you don't get stuck on a quest without Questy that is too vague for you to actually figure out where the hell you're supposed to go. Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it doesn't actually remove basically any of the gameplay because you still have to figure out how to get there.
right, yeah,
Um, but Random Dungeon Finder is yeah, interesting for them to be adding it this late stage.
yeah. Which, yeah, to be fair, means like maybe Wrath is where they stop, and yeah, and then maybe that becomes like the Classic Plus loop. It's like you go back through Classic, TBC, and Wrath again, and like there's like changes in each, like new content. We'll say,
Maybe
maybe not changes, but
maybe that's the next classic thing is Season of Wrath. Go back to vanilla, and they like I
I'm
don't know have zombie invasions or something. The Lich King shows up and waves his sword at you.
yeah. I mean, it would be, to me, Classic Plus is always an interesting idea of like, would you engage, like, would enough players engage in like a new raid, but with vanilla classes, right?
Yeah, but
And like,
it couldn't.
Sorry.
It fundamentally could not be designed like a modern raid, right? Like they couldn't design. They couldn't take Avarice and put it in classic and have people eat it up.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it would be cool to do things that required or that certain classes excelled at in classic that are not essentially like the flavor of the month or like the over, like it's not like a warrior or a warlock, right? Like you had something that you might need a mage for, you might need like
Yeah.
a shaman, or maybe not a shaman, but like a rogue for something like that, where
Or
like
you just bring 20 unholy DKs and you delete the fights from existence.
yeah, that is also what happens in Wrath right now. So yeah, I mean that
This is after they nerfed them very significantly, by the way.
Yeah, they're still crazy. Yeah, it's just, I mean, that's a combination of, I think, them being overpowered and then the whole snapshotting mechanic that's still in Wrath, right? That but yeah, no, I think, I mean, yeah, that would be my goal. That would be maybe not goal, but my want in a classic plus environment is like new raid content that makes other classes that are less played important to your ability to clear the raid, or maybe not important, but like make it easier to clear certain fights if you have them there. So yeah. And the only other final point, I guess, from the interview is Blizzard did say they're not really giving any sort of feedback or information on how many realms they're starting up for hardcore. They're not doing any sort of a name reservation system. So it seems like this is just you log in on Friday or Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Pacific, and there's new realms you can make a character on, and that's it. So I'll have to make sure I can maybe get my name on that, but
well, yeah. The nice thing is you don't need to because you're gonna die.
That's not my first character. I'm making it to 60. That's the goal.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm making yet, but that's the goal. But cool. So that's the classic, I'll say, update for this week. So
yeah. A couple other small things. The Kalimdor Cup stuff went in this week, wasn't it?
Yeah, this week.
And that was, so obviously there was all the data mining about this, and we're like, oh my god, dragon riding in the old world. Very limited. You can only do these specific dragon riding races. And apparently they're pretty hard. Especially the one in Ungaro. I've heard a lot of people being like, how do I get this on gold? Right? Like how do I time this on gold? But apparently they are pretty challenging.
I've basically, so I started this after raid on Thursday since we got done a little earlier. And yeah, the Ajara one is the timer. I think it's two things with the Ajara one. Timer's not too bad, but it's a very long race. I think it's like almost 90 or like 100-ish seconds. So it's like a minute and a half long or over a minute and a half long. And it all weaves around the track that's in Ajara.
Yeah. And
so like there are random light posts and like the track itself, and you're very low to the ground. So it's like very, I want to say technical because you're kind of, it's not, I don't know. It's not like that. But yeah, it's definitely a little difficult to do that. But it's more dragon riding, it's more races. And like I said, it's not a pushover like the original ones were, the ones on Dragon.
I still haven't unlocked the advanced dragon riding races on the Dragon Isles. So
really, I went deep, and so I literally went and golded every one of them. So I have gold on the Dragon Isles in advanced, reverse, and normal runs. And so I'm working on Kalimdor Cup now, which is, I don't know, it's the dragon riding stuff is fun. And that I'm a sucker for like racing, like just like racing games in general, but like the idea of like, okay, you have a time and you have to go through this track. So what's the fastest way to do it? Like that sort of optimization stuff I enjoy.
Can't wait for the Anom TOC speedrun.
It's funny, I don't care about damage optimization, which I think is because like it doesn't matter, the boss dies at the end anyway. But like
what about the damage as a mechanism for getting through the course more quickly?
It doesn't translate in my mind. Like that's the problem. Is like one of the hunters because there's only one other hunter in my guild, just a quick aside about this, he was telling me, he's like, hey, he's like if you go into melee and drop your trap at like this like specific time or like within this 5-second window on like Jiraxis or something, it works out that you can then trap every time a portal or like a volcano comes out, some like weird damage optimization. And I was like, or I can just walk in and drop my trap in the beginning so I don't forget. I don't have to remember like 18 seconds in to drop. I can just do it 2 seconds in.
Yeah.
He's like, oh well, it's like less damage. I was like, we're still gonna kill the boss, bud. Like, chill, please. So yeah, it's funny. I think my optimization brain happens more on like solo content or like where I
Yeah.
have full control versus like in a group where it's
Yeah.
like I think I'm less able to see the optimization change. So um but yeah, so Kalimdor cups out, you get a sweet transmog. Actually not a sweet transmog, but it's an okay transmog if you do it all. There's a currency you get for completing the stuff. Then the other is there's a weird, so we don't really talk about these mini events, but the only reason I put this in here is there's an event coming up at the end of August called Secrets of Azeroth, where you sort of like go around and sort of discover like different secrets and like clues and stuff like that. With like some community involvement. The only reason I bring it up is like some of the transmogs are like super cool. Where like you get a weird like gnomish like mind control looking cap, which is if you
Right.
ever played like classic, like I think that was super cool. But yeah, it's essentially like it seems like it's a community like almost like ARG type event where there's
Yeah,
like
that was my
clues to go.
impression.
Yeah, clues to go like different areas and sort of look up different things in game and sort of follow along. And it's I guess it lasts from the 31st to the 13th in terms of like new clues come out. And but I think you'd still do it. I think the blue post mentions like it'll be there. Like the ability to do this you don't have to do it within the 31st and the 13th of September. It's just that's how long it takes for all the clues to be released, and then it'll be in the game for I
Yeah.
say long after that. I guess that means for a while. So
It's an
um
interesting take on like the, dropping the stuff like the what's it? The maze one. What was the maze one?
oh, the mind bender thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, but it was like a horse, right? It
A
was the
whole bunch,
actual horse.
yeah, a whole bunch of like the just secret things that they've dumped into the game. Is a different approach.
Yeah. Yeah, this is yeah, and that so yeah, I love that horse. I love the thought process for how so yeah, I liked like the way people figured out that sort of mount was fun. And the one after that, the mind bender that you could do with some friends where it was like you needed a group of people to get it done was fun too. Yeah. Secrets are cool in the game. I like that stuff. Um
Yeah.
but cool. And then so one just final piece before we get into sort of the Mythic Plus is our main topic today. We're not done with what overlays can do in World of Warcraft. So we spent a bunch of time talking about this last time. The only thing I want to say is there was a proof of concept for like a map like overlay that came out. It's actually not that great. I don't know if you watched the video of it.
Yeah, I did.
There's enough of a delay that it's not perfect. But I think based on the thread and what the individual who built this said is like it's only keying off of like two specific types of events, which I think are healing and damage events, and
Yeah.
like doesn't take into account like buff, resource gain events, like other events that might have additional um positional data to maybe smooth out the movement. But um as a proof of concept, potentially it's there. Yeah, I mean, I think this is
Even
all sorry.
even still, so like the things that they're showing on the map, they have the permanent location. So this is Kazara. They have the permanent locations of every one of the portals that drop. They've got the Hellbeam. When the boss starts to cast it, it shows the direction that it's going, and it doesn't handle the lasers. So the lasers are, just happening, but it's still like the update rate, like you said, is pretty slow, right? We're talking like 5 FPS on this
Yeah.
mini map, but it still has like the player locations and all of the locations of these mechanics. And the Wowhead post about this brings up AVR. This is not AVR, but
Yeah.
once you have left the bounds of the game, right, AVR can happen, and this is like step one towards AVR. AVR, for those that maybe weren't listening last week, it weren't around for OG Classic Wrath, was an add-on that actually overlaid like mechanic graphics into the game, into the game world. Not like a weak aura that warned you of something, but like actually putting stuff on the floor, right?
Yeah. So like, yeah. So like, for example, if someone got a bomb debuff or needed to be in a specific position, it would show on your screen a ring where you could stand.
Yeah,
But it didn't matter if you moved your camera anywhere; that ring would also move with you on that sort of plane,
yeah.
which was nice. So yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it's not. To be fair, you're right. It's not far removed from like full AVR, but it. Yeah, I think that's to me like the debuff thing that was shown last week around like the private being able to see private auras right away. That's like an issue, but like this sort of map now that's there and like the code being published is like it's now just going to be a massive thing. So
yeah. I mean,
which
I'm
means like
surprised they haven't
this
fixed
is
it.
getting nerfed.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
surprised they haven't fixed this yet. Like this was
yeah,
inevitable. As soon as the cat was out of the bag with the with the combat log being so fast, um this was just an inevitability that we would reach this point, and if they don't nerf it, it's going to get even more advanced before they do nerf it, right?
yeah.
um
Exactly.
like you can do things once you have the position information. um I mean, I guess the main thing you don't have right now is you don't have player facing information. That's not in the combat log, or at least not nearly quickly enough to be useful.
Right.
So I guess a real AVR would probably either need to do memory reading.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it would have to do memory reading, basically.
Yeah.
At which point you're definitely running into like Warden. Like that's the kind of thing that Warden is there to detect.
Right.
But still, like a mini map of all the mechanics and everything. Like this
Yeah. I
is
mean, yeah. I mean, imagine if you could like, I mean, like Natharin, of course, this would be perfect on for
right.
like potentially portal spawns and knowing where everybody is, right? Because you could take positional data of the room itself and then overlay where people need to stand
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
But even on like Zakarn, right? Like I don't know if trap triggers are in the combat
No,
log,
they're
like
not.
not what specific trap. Okay, well then that makes it maybe a little bit harder to use something
Yeah.
there. But yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it'll be yeah. I mean, this is there's gonna be changes to the combat log. I mean, what my hope is that it's a delay in the write out and not a change in the data, right? Like because
Yeah.
I think the data the combat log has is great. And I think it's really good from like a retrospective perspective, which is I think
Yeah.
the original intent of it. So I hope the changes Blizzard makes are in terms of like the frequency of the writes out
Yeah.
to a file versus, hey, now we're just going to remove all the position data from everything, which is just
That doesn't even solve like the assignment aura thing, right? Because that still lets you do
no,
the
yeah,
Neltharion assignment aura outside the game, and
yeah,
they don't want that either. What I hope the end result of this is, like you said, a delay. I think is the best approach.
mm,
People were talking about the memory consumption of it, but I honestly don't think that that's an issue at this stage,
not with
because
modern computers,
this
no.
this isn't a fundamental thing that you have to have on, right? Like you don't have to have the advanced combat log enabled. If if it is going to take it, 500 megs to store the combat log buffer before it writes it out, it's fine. You can just turn it off if that's a problem for
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
So I think that that's okay. But where I hope this leads is that they stop designing these mechanics that basically require a assignment. Like the Neltharion mechanic is the jailer holes mechanic. It's just
yeah,
the same mechanic. The thing that kills you is different. The way you wipe the raid is the same. You don't get to your spot.
right,
Um,
yeah,
and like both of those mechanics, like I was talking to people in guild last night, and it's just like imagine if the jailer in phase one had just like given you a color, and then each of the holes had a color, and you just had to go to one of them, right?
yeah,
There's things about that remove some of the like players figuring out how to do the fight, right? Players figuring out what the right place to start, how to move, how much to move, all this stuff in order to make the fight work. Um, Neltharion doesn't really have that though. They eliminated a lot of that, and there's no reason that they could not have the mythic change for the hearts mechanic, for example, could have been
Yeah.
some interaction with the walls where like you needed to hit certain parts of the wall with the heart, right? And just, you know, colors, and you gotta go to your color. Everybody's gotta do it. Don't make us do these like 5-6 player coordination things where you have 5 seconds to do the mechanic. That just requires a weak aura. It just requires one.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's that sort of processing that like they want to get people to do it, but I mean it's also the fact that like for I-beams or even for like the holes, right? There you're communicating between 5 people something that has to be done within like 4 or 5 seconds, right? And there's
Yeah.
just not enough time where like if you're not as a player like reacting the moment you get the mechanic and knowing exactly where you're going, then you're going to die, right?
Yeah.
Like there's not there's and then there's that fine line of like how much time do you give a player, like give the team basically a chance to like discuss it, because like to be fair, like I still go back to Mechatork and like the robots right there.
Uh-huh.
Like that's that to me is one of the most, maybe not the perfect mechanic, but it's one of the best mechanics that forced raid communication through
Right.
random raid members.
Yeah.
And like there was it was still a tight timer, but there was enough time where like if you screw up once, you can recover. You can't screw up twice,
Yeah.
but you get sort of like one screw up in there. And it doesn't feel like you have way too much time. It still feels tight. And I
Right.
think if they're going to shift to like, okay, we want to take power away from weak cores, away from just like any sort of like automated processing, right? Which is what it is. Um, and put it back into what we want players to communicate. They need to look at, to be fair, Mechatork and why that worked, like how to basically incorporate the robots into like a standard debuff.
Right. And I mean, there's things like obviously Sepulcher was the peak of them trying to one up the World First Guilds, right? So
Yeah.
the Jailer is maybe not the best example of things that they're going to do now, right? But the bomb mechanic on the Jailer, aside from all of the actual gameplay issues of like jumping in the hole and getting knocked and then clipping into the edge of it and stopping and things like that, the mechanic would have worked without an assignment weak core. There is a number that they could pick for the debuff duration where you no longer need an assignment weak.
Yeah.
But at that point, it just has to be such a long debuff, right? With that many people, it just has to be a really long debuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same situation, I think, with Niltharion. Like, they could do this without resorting to actually doing the assignments for us. But, I mean, if you look at the mechanic and the answer for the player is, we don't do the assignment ourselves, we have a weak aura that does the assignment for us, then they should just either not do the mechanic or make the assignment part of the mechanic. Like the mechanic has the assignment built in.
Yeah. Which would, I mean, and then a way to do that is almost like, to be fair, like something like debuff duration could be the assignment where like you get 5 players, you get a debuff. Their durations are all different and based on all the like you get the same.
Now you're approaching the math boss from Final Fantasy. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not, but like so here just hear me out because I think it's pretty.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be complicated, but the idea is like if there, let's say just for simplicity's sake, the debuff is always either 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 seconds long. So the 5-second person always goes to this position. The 6-second person always goes to that position. So like the amount of time on your debuff dictates where you move to. So as a player,
then you have to have a weak aura that tells you which one you were.
Which is fine. They do that. You just have a private weak aura that has a big square on your screen that has the duration in the front that has like what your starting duration is, and you have to look at. You know, like I think to me, like if you think about jailer bombs, like the example there, like the point to the pizza pie is always the shortest. Like the next one to the left is the next one. Like, and so you knew like if I get the 6-second debuff, I'm front left second, or I'm second row left.
I think that sounds really frustrating because if you're not looking at it when it spawns and it's still a private aura, you can't tell which one you have.
Right, which is why you need to pay attention as a player to your debuffs. So that's the idea. Is like it takes the idea of private auras, and you can still use them. You can remove an assignment weak aura, and it's on the player to figure out.
So why not just make the debuffs different colors? Then you can just tell if you're not looking at it at the instant that it is on you. You
Well,
can
that's
still
fine
just
too. I
tell.
mean, like, yeah, like that's also an option. I'm just saying if you want it to look exactly the same to everybody, there's the potential of using duration as the
Yeah,
differentiator, and in turn the assignment,
yeah. I don't
right?
like that. I don't like that one bit.
To be fair, I think that's a great idea because it number one, it forces people to actually check their debuffs and not look for a call. And it's entirely like it's very similar in my mind. It's very similar to the robots, a Mechatart, because it's individual responsibility.
Yeah, yeah. I just don't like
So,
that. There's basically a 1 second thing, and if you happen to be looking away from the screen,
well, I mean, you
for
can make them
whatever
larger.
reason,
Like one can be 5, one can be 7, one can be 9. Right? There can be a larger differentiation between the debuffs, and that way,
right?
if you realize if you're the 7-second one and I see 6 seconds, well, then I know they just went out. I know I'm not the first one because the first one can't be 6 seconds, so
Yeah.
I'm the second person in that row.
I think that like that then in my mind that runs into the same issues with mechanic visibility that we complain about all the where it's just like
Oh, it's information overload, 100%.
well it's
But
like
like,
we complain about stuff like fuzzy edges of the circles and stuff like the scar lines not going behind the animation for the line,
yeah,
not going behind it until it explodes and kills you, right? Stuff like that where it's like you
but
die because you
that's
couldn't because the game didn't tell you where the thing was going to be and it
but
was
that's
not visually possible for you to tell,
but that's
practically speaking.
different. But that's in my mind, that's different because like fuzzy edges on a debuff is one thing. But like if I have a 6-second debuff, if I get a 6-second version of a debuff and I have to go somewhere in the fight, there's no there's no fuzziness there. The fuzziness is me not paying attention when the debuff comes out, which could be a problem. Meaning like there's a bunch of other mechanics happening at the same time. You have to move for this one specific one. Agree there, but there's no fuzziness in it. It's just I've gotten this mechanic. This is my response to getting it, and either I realize I've gotten that one and make the correct response, or if we take hearts for example, the hearts at different durations, and you go different places with them. Well, maybe as the 5-second one, I go to the 6-second person spot and maybe there's enough time that the 6-second person realizes I'm screwing up and they can adjust. So it's not a pass fail in terms of that, but it's
But that
a
at that point they
different
just have to
response.
change the mechanic to give you the ability. That's part of the issue with the hearts, right? Is there's no room for recovery.
Well, yeah. So all I'm saying is like you can to call this jailer bombs too. So don't take the fact that like there's no time for recovery. It's just like the idea of the debuff duration is the differentiator for how you react to it.
I really
And as
don't
an
like that.
and as an individual, you need to know that. But how is that any different than jailer bombs and being assigned the center, being assigned the middle pizza pie versus the back
Okay,
one?
so it's like
And you're not
also
being able to read the weak order right.
the
Like
this
if
is
I can't read
asking this is basically saying you as a player now have to care about an additional attribute of the debuff that nothing else in the game has ever asked you to care about.
agreed, which is, but there has never been a weak order to say you need to go down a specific hole with a bomb
But there's
jailer.
always have been assignment weak orders. Like you get
But not specific, but generally not specific ones. Like there are 5 people that have to respond in a very specific way to a mechanic.
we had them on Denathrius. We had them on I want to say we had one for Nizoth. I don't remember for what. Um Nizoth
What was the
pretty
Nathrius's?
The arrows for the mirror. Like 4 people got marked with the arrow and you went to your spot on the mirror.
Which
The blade, the sword jumping through people. And
you'd have to go to a specific spot. You'd have to go to a specific spot. You just had to be spread.
Well, you did go to a specific spot though, because otherwise you cleave the raid.
Well, you went to the edges. Edges. Like general location edges. At least that's how we did it in our guild.
I mean, we
didn't have
we had 4 spots on you went.
Yeah, so
two people went close to the mirror, 2 people went in front of them, and that was your spots. And I mean, obviously, there's stuff like Ajara, right, where literally Ajara is like assignment week or a hell.
No, and I don't. So that is yeah, actually, Ajara is a really good example of like. All I'm saying is like Ajara, like the mechanics we were talking about, where it's like private weak ores are being used for like hiding the way you respond to a debuff. My only point was to continue to hide from a weak aura how to do it. You need to find another differentiator. And in my mind, like you could say color
you just
one.
leave it as a private aura because weak auras can't see private auras at all.
But I'm saying like if the okay, so like your point about hearts is that the mechanic is bad as a private weak aura because it's not the duration is too short to respond in an appropriate way. So you almost need an assignment weak aura to basically respond to it. And my point is essentially, if they want to continue to use private weak auras, they need differentiators for the ability to allow players to respond to them based on either when or how they get it. Meaning, if like there's another hearts like debuff or bombs like debuff, you say
Right.
color, fine. Color could be a way that you get 5 debuffs. There's 5 different colors. Depending on your color, you go someplace.
Yeah.
My point was, if they want everything to look the same, because to be fair, I'm assuming.
I guess my point is, if they all look the same, it's still bad. Like if they all still look the same, it's still bad.
But
so
then-
if your
but
only
then you just-
differentiator is something that changes to the point that you can no longer differentiate them, it's still bad. It's like still irrecoverably bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, color, like duration and color are the same thing. Like
But,
if you have a
the color
different
stays
color
the
weaker,
same, the whole thing. For the duration, it's changing, and if you're not like, you basically have to set them so that
well,
they
no, but
are
you can get a
staggered
different color
enough.
each time. But you get a different
Right,
like
but
so
for
the heart
duration
debuff,
of
like
for the duration of the debuff, it's the same. Like you get your thing, and it's the same color for the whole time that you have that mechanic, until you get it the next time, and maybe it's a different color on that one. Versus
So, but-
duration, you get it, and there's nothing on the debuff that tells you what the max duration was. So if you like get distracted, lose track of it, or aren't looking at it when it gets put on you initially, it now looks like any of the other ones.
But in the hearts case, if you don't move to the red spot the moment you get the debuff, it's unrecoverable.
That's actually not
Very
like,
similar.
the hearts.
Very similar to the duration.
The hearts
you
right
don't
now, you actually do have time to sit there and stare at your weak auras.
Which is so if you're I think it's maybe just a philosophical different around duration, because like my only point was like providing a way to differentiate if you're going to put out 5 of the same debuff on someone or on a team, and the team has to respond in a certain way to eliminate or to make private weak or private auras more palatable. They need a better way to differentiate between the 5 debuffs that go out, and whether it's color or duration, I don't think it matters. I like the idea of duration just because it puts more pressure on you paying attention to the actual mechanic, versus with color, to your point, you get 3-4 seconds, maybe not that long, but you get a second or two to understand what color you have and then respond, which to me is no different than actually watching your debuffs, seeing them go up and responding based on a number underneath of it.
Yeah,
and the only time that doesn't work is if you last 3 seconds maybe of not looking at your debuffs.
Yeah, I don't like the duration thing at all. I think it would be very frustrating.
I think colors are frustrating because we have colorblind raiders in our raid.
Right. So this is something. If you look at what other games have done with this kind of mechanic, right? You look at what Final Fantasy has done. It's always A plus B. It's color plus icon, for example. Not always, but they're usually pretty good about it. Where like you get a red one, but it's also a fire icon. Or you get a green one and it's, I don't know, like a plant icon, something like that, where it's like, okay, the same thing with Mechatorque. You had the colors, but also it was a wrench and a gear and a light bulb or whatever, and like you can communicate using the symbol instead of the color. Just like, give it 2 things, neither of which changes after, like, you get your assignment, and your assignment shouldn't, the thing that is telling you your assignment, I don't think should change in the middle of you having the mechanic.
That's fair. That's fair.
I
feel like we spent too much time. We spent
way too much time about that.
we can move on.
We were going to talk about the God comp getting nerfed, and I think you mentioned that Mistweaver got some changes too.
Yeah, so I think we'll talk about the Mistweaver stuff first, since we're way too long on that topic.
Also, we are technically a monk podcast.
Yeah, we should probably talk about monks. So Mistweaver is getting changes this Tuesday. So I'll read through them and then sort of talk about what this is. So first up is Ancient Teachings is now transferring 150% of the damage done, up from 135%. So a buff to Ancient Teachings. Yu'lon's Grace will now stack up to 15% of maximum health. Was 10%, sorry. And it's 3% now per second. Chi Cocoon's Absorb is increased by 100%.
Is that the
it's
shield?
It's the shield from your celestial. Okay. So it's the shield that goes out on, I think it's 5 players when you hit evoke Chi or evoke Yu'lon. And then Enveloping Breath's healing is decreased by 12%. So as a mythic pluser, as you read these changes, these are all great things. The Chi Cocoon Absorb is huge because that basically goes on your full party. So you get that instant absorb. It's now, basically 100% stronger. The enveloping breath decrease, not a huge deal. You're not relying on enveloping breath healing much anyway in Mythic
Yeah.
Plus. It's nice, hurts us slightly, but to be fair, Chi Cocoon was definitely the larger piece of that. And then the ancient teaching buff, of course, being able to transfer more damage or more healing from the damage you do, always a good thing. So in Mythic Plus, these are, generally nothing but great changes. Now in raids, which is sort of the secondary part of this, it's actually a net increase, which is funny. So I mean, if you look at sort of the decreases and the increases, right? Like the Chi Cocoon Absorb increase, I think ends up being about 3 to 4k HPS increase over the course of a typical boss fight, and the enveloping breath decrease is about a 2 to 3k HPS nerf.
Okay.
So it basically nets out to about 1,000 HPS buff. It's extremely minor, and it does push the healing into different areas. So like it pushes it from an initial absorb where you want to make sure you're using your celestials around when damage is about to occur, which is what you should be doing anyway. So it puts more healing there and less healing over the course of your celestial through enveloping breath. So net, it's an increase. I think some people are slightly upset about this, but to be fair, I mean, most of these changes I think are relatively keep the, like they say in their note, relatively keep the power of these talents similar in raids, but is a increase in 5-man content, which is what they want. So
the Yu'lon's Grace change is going to be interesting because that is a class talent, not a spec talent. We'll have to see if they implemented it correctly so it doesn't also buff it for Brewmasters and Windwalkers.
Yeah, that'll be some testing you guys need to do. Yeah.
Well, since this is a hotfix, it's not on the PTR. So we're just gonna have to wait until Tuesday and see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting time.
Fun time.
We'll say. Yeah. So yeah, so there's that. So yeah, I mean, overall net increase, a larger increase in Mythic Plus, but still an increase in raids, based on these changes. I mean, it doesn't materially change any sort of talent trees or like different talent setups and things like that. You'll basically play what you're playing. You're either playing Clouded Focus if you like that, or there's a unison build that people have been running around with on certain fights out there in raids at least. And then Mythic Plus, I think, honestly stays the exact same. There's no changes there. So, but yeah, so those are the Mistweaver changes. No other monk specs got any changes coming up this week. So there's that.
There is the new scaling stuff. That so you want to go over this?
No. I was gonna say, which of your Mythic Plus is probably the most important part.
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about.
So they are nerfing the God Comp again, and I don't want to spend too much time going through the actual God Comp nerfs because we aren't here to talk about mage nerfs, really.
Yeah.
So, they nerfed every piece of the God Comp again, and basically, in admission of the fact that by continuing to nerf the God Comp to bring it in line with the rest of the specs, they were going to be making key levels unattainable, right? Like, if you nerf the only thing that could do a 30, then nobody can do a 30 anymore. That is just the highest key for the rest of the season. So what they're doing is they are reducing the scaling from 10% per key level in Mythic Plus, only above plus 20. They're reducing it from 10% per key level to 8%. And Wowhead has tables of how all of this breaks down. It's actually interesting that that's already what the modifier is from 1 to 20.
Yeah.
It goes up after 20 to try and keep people, I think, from reaching such insane key levels, and then they released augmentation and everything went to hell, but what this means is basically what was a 30 is now a 28 in terms of actual difficulty, because there's no mechanical changes. It's just the numbers go up. So what was a 30 at 1,245% damage increase is now going to be 1,036% damage increase. which is what a 28 is roughly right now.
Yeah.
So they're nerfing the God comp again. Everybody else gets keys being slightly easier. So you're gonna, if you're doing 20s right now, actually, I mean, that's not accurate because level 20 stays the same.
Yeah.
If you're doing like the like big changes to it don't really kick in until the very high keys. If you're looking at a 25 right now, that's 773% as of today. On Tuesday, that will be a 705%, which is basically dropping it by 1 key level.
Yeah.
So it's a slight, like, if you're not actually pushing really high keys, it's not much of a change or a change at all. But yeah, it my concern is that they haven't actually nerfed the God comp enough, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about what the actual nerfs are. Because if the God comp nerfs are not enough, and it's still the best comp, does this not just reproduce the issue immediately?
Yeah, and I think that's my understanding. So I have a couple of people in my guild that run really high mythic plus. So I got a chance to talk to them like today and yesterday when this was announced. And yeah, I mean, the underlying issue is, I mean, while mage, evoker, shadow priest, druid, and holy paladin or guardian druid and holy paladin are really good classes in mythic plus, it's what each of them bring outside of just their damage, right? So it's not like these are all the highest damage specs in mythic plus. They're up there. I mean, I think holy paladin's still probably the highest damage healer even after the nerfs, but it's the fact that like priest brings mass dispel and PI, and so like there are certain mechanics you can essentially negate because you have mass dispel, and then with PI you have on demand damage increases for your mage or even your evoker for additional support there. So yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this as we got into the podcast today before we started, was just basically like, to me all this does is basically make it so like Exodia can go back to doing 30s like they were before they were nerfed, right? And like maybe as an individual now you can start to push like from your own individual point of view to like a 25. Like if you're stuck at the 25 key level, you get to go up to 26s and maybe push a 27, right? But
Yeah.
It doesn't materially change to me the balance of what is considered quote unquote the God comp currently.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking. I pulled up the nerfs again just to make sure I hadn't misremembered. There's no augmentation nerfs, which is hilarious. That is the thing that needs to be nerfed. Like,
yeah,
they nerfed Holy Paladin damage. Okay,
mm-hmm.
They nerfed Fire Mage AOE damage, which, in fairness, did need it. That was really even absent an augmentation of. They nerfed Guardian Druid's healing, self healing. No priest nerfs, no augmentation evoker nerfs.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I think what Blizzard is, this is maybe the issue with the releasing specs in the middle of a piece of we'll say seasonal content is like the best way to put it, right?
Yeah, it was
because this happened, like this exact thing happens where you have the people who are on the train early get all the benefits, and now it's basically trying to bring everyone else up to those same levels. And I think this is, hopefully this is like the as extreme as it gets, right? There's the site out there that sort of shows you the disposition of like your top 2000 keys, I think, and like what classes do them. And it's laughable, this season. But
as soon as the patch hits, you can see it just immediately become nothing. Like it's like 80% the God comp the first week, and it rapidly gets worse up to like basically 99%.
Yeah. So I mean, this is definitely, I think, hopefully an outlier in terms of like 5 specs being just hands and shoulders above everybody else. But at the same time, this is a threat. Like to me, like I feel so bad for people who like think not think, that's really rude. Who push Mythic Plus as like their main form of content in this game.
Right.
Because if you don't play one of those 5 specs, you are screwed.
Yeah.
Like in terms of just making any sort of headway into like the top level.
You could still probably push for title. It's gonna be hard. Like the more people that pile onto the god comp, the harder it's going to be to get title as anything else. Um, so yeah. There was a you had one more thing in the notes that I think we are running out of time for, talking about the structure of healing in Dragonflight and like
I would like.
You want to go through it? You want that to be a
No,
next
I
week
think
thing?
I think that's a next week topic because I do want to spend a little bit of time on it because it's turning into. And sorry, I am solo dad this week, so you probably hear my kids yelling in the background.
Yeah.
It's a larger conversation I think that we can do in like the next like 5 minutes because it's
Yeah.
really just covering.
Yeah, we would have had time for it if I hadn't dragged out that conversation about the overlays in private auras for like 20 minutes.
That is true. No, but that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
so.
we'll talk about that next week. So talking about the structure of healing, the numbers of healing, what feels good and what doesn't right now. Right?
Yeah. And why I hate healing, we'll say.
Currently. Oh, bold. Are you
that'll be my take.
Augmentation now? Augmentation.
We are if this priest joins our guild, we are augmentation through and through, starting
Augmentomoly.
Yeah.
Augmentomoly.
It's actually Anom EV. I'm an electric vehicle.
All right. Well,
powering everybody else.
That is gonna be it for the show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did and you want to support this podcast and the work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord. It is the best place. Give a nom crap for re-rolling off of Mistweaver.
Yes.
And to find out if that Yu'lon's Grace buff actually impacts Brewmaster as well, we'll know on Tuesday. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.